Hello class, in this video we'll be talking about lesson 7, which is entitled Gibeonites, Philistines, and the Psalm of Deliverance. It covers 2 Samuel chapter 21 through 22. So one thing to keep in mind here while we're talking about this section is it does appear that this section, even though it appears later in the book of 2 Samuel, story-wise, it seems that the events that happened here actually happened sometime earlier. So you remember in the last lesson when you talked about how Absalom was defeated. So this lesson, it seems that the events we're talking about actually happened even before that whole ordeal. So keep that in mind. So as we begin reading, we learn about that there was a famine in the days of David. Now, famine, if you recall, that's just a period where food is real scarce. Oftentimes, it could be because maybe there hasn't been enough rain to water the crops, so they didn't have food. But it could be for other reasons. But the point is that there's no food in the land. And so this famine has actually been going on year after year. So a total of 3 years that this happened. So that's a long time to go with having very little food. So David goes to the Lord, inquires of the Lord to find out what he could do about this, why this is happening. And the Lord answers him, and he says, I quote, "It is because of Saul and his bloodthirsty house, because he killed the Gibeonites." So this might not make sense to you at first, but in order to understand this, you actually have to go back to Joshua chapter 9 to get some context. So even though it's not part of the reading, I highly suggest that you go back and read Joshua chapter 9 to kind of understand what's happening. So basically, I'll try to summarize it, but basically what happened in Joshua chapter 9 is this is the period when Joshua was leading the Israelites and they were conquering Canaan, and they were instructed by the Lord to drive out all the people of the land. And so they had been winning battles, and people had been hearing about this, the people in the land. So one of those people were the Gibeonites. And so they grew fearful because they didn't want to die. So they came up with a scheme to kind of trick Israel or Joshua into making a treaty with them. So you can read about the details of that and how they actually did that. But basically, they did accomplish this. So they tricked Joshua into making a treaty with them where they wouldn't attack them. So even though they were supposed to conquer all the people, because they made this covenant, the Israelites made this covenant with the Gibeonites. Now they had to honor that covenant, and so they couldn't attack them. They had to leave them be. So that is what the Lord is referring to when he's talking about they killed the Gibeonites. And again, he says it is because of Saul and his bloodthirsty house. Now, this other point about Saul, we actually don't have this story in the Bible, but it appears that sometime during Saul's reign, he made it kind of his mission to destroy the Gibeonites, even though he wasn't supposed to because of this covenant, which was made many years before. So that is the reason why this famine is happening. So David goes to the Gibeonites and he asks them what can he do to make up for this broken promise. And he offers them money, but that's not what they want. And what the Gibeonites actually tell them that they require is they ask for 7 descendants of Saul's family to be given to them so that they could be hanged. So that is a very serious quest. So here David now has to choose seven members of Saul's household to basically give them over to death. So he does spare Mephibosheth. Remember, that's Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, who David had already kind of made a promise to look after. So he spares Mephibosheth, but we do read about the 7 people he does have to choose, or he does choose. And so those 7 people, we are told, are Armoni and Mephibosheth, the 2 sons of Rizpah. Now you might be wondering, like, well, didn't I just say Mephibosheth was spared? So it turns out there's actually 2 people in Saul's household who had the name Mephibosheth. So you have Mephibosheth, who is a son of Jonathan. That's the one that David spared. But you also have another Mephibosheth, who is the son of Rizpah, who was one of Saul's concubines. So Armani and Mephibosheth, they would be like two of Saul's sons. And then we're also told that there are 5 sons of Merab. Merab was one of Saul's daughters. So it would kind of, we're basically saying it's 5 of Saul's grandsons and then 2 of Saul's sons. So these are the people who are chosen. And so David gives into the request of the Gibeonites, and he hands these people over, and they are hanged. So Rizpah, who was the mother of Armani and Mephibosheth, she's, obviously this is a horrible situation for her. She just had to see 2 of her sons die. And in her mourning, what she does, she takes some sackcloth and she makes a place for herself to stay by the bodies, because they left these bodies hanging kind of as a display for everyone to see. And so Rizpah, she stays by the bodies, and she's making sure that no animals come and try to eat at the bodies. So she guards the bodies. And it says that she guards them from the beginning of the barley harvest to when the first rains came. I'll get the wording here. From the beginning of harvest until the late rains poured on them from heaven. So what it's referring to by that is basically the time of the season. So beginning of harvest until late rains, from what I've researched, that's probably about 6 months that she stayed by those bodies, guarding them. So David hears about what Rizpah's done, and he decides to go ahead and take these bodies once it's over. Take the bodies, including the rest of Saul's families that is dead. So Saul himself and Jonathan. He takes all their bodies and he buries them and gives them a proper burial. So that's the end of that section. The next 2 sections, they give us, the next section, titled Philistines, it gives us a little background on some more battles that David had with the Philistines. So you remember the Philistines are one of the main people that David fights with during his reign. We get some details about several of the battles. They had a lot of battles with giants involved. So Goliath was not the only giant. There are other giants that they fought with. One of them that they fought with, Ishbi-Benob, he actually comes very close to killing David. It says that in one of the battles, David grew faint, and this giant, Ishbi-Benob, has a moment where he thinks he can kill David. But Abishai, who, remember, that's one of David's mighty men, comes to his rescue and kills off the giant. And it's after this that David's men tell him, I'll quote here, "You shall go out no more with us to battle, lest you quench the lamp of Israel." So you got to remember, David's their king, their leader. He's the anointed one. He has a very close relationship with God. They do not want to lose him. So that's, after this close call, they say, hey, you shouldn't go out with us to battle anymore. You'll read about a few other battles with giants in there. It's got some interesting details. And then in the last section, David's song. This whole chapter 22 is a song that David writes after he's been delivered from all his enemies, including Saul. So it's a very beautiful song. It's got some great imagery in it. And if you read some of the comparisons that he writes, such as "The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer," that probably sounds pretty familiar, because if you have been in this church for any period at all and have sang any songs with us, you've probably sang a song that has compared the Lord to being our rock or our fortress and deliverer. So it's worth your time to read. It's got a lot of beautiful imagery in it. It really shows how much that David trusted in the Lord and gives him thanks. So that actually wraps up lesson 7. So please do the reading, because you'll catch a lot of details which I didn't have time to talk about here. But do your reading, answer the questions, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks for listening.